led by TJ Martin on my right, and then we will turn to our Q&A with Chief Sullivan on my left. I want to just make sure we have some expectations so everyone is able to communicate their thoughts and get their be heard, because we realize you took the time out to be here. We want to make sure everybody has an opportunity. So we have comment cards that my staff or those of you collected, if you want to comment, and then you'll come to the mic with your question. And then just try to keep it to 3 minutes so that everybody has an opportunity. We're not saying you can't come back up if you have additional, but we want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to voice their concerns. And then lastly, this is a general conversation. So this is probably not going to be focused on specific cases. This is more so going to figure out we want to make sure we hear from the community what your thoughts are on what we have done as a city so far and what needs to be done going forward. The goal is to start the dialogue, because and I don't anticipate us solving the issue tonight. It would be phenomenal if we could just snap our fingers and solve it, but that's not going to happen. This is just the beginning of the conversations to get that done. So at this time, I will go ahead and turn it over to TJ to do our community update on the DOJ rescue.
And if you don't mind, I am going to stand here because it's easier when I do the presentation to do so. So again, my name is TJ Martin. I serve as the Chief Assistant City Attorney in the City of Phoenix Law Department. I am the liaison to the Department of Justice on behalf of the city and the police department in providing information to the Department of Justice in their investigation, locating that information within the City of Phoenix, and transferring it and documenting the information that we provided. So my presentation is a high-level overview. Earlier during the year, PD staff and I made this presentation, a longer version of this presentation, at least 20 times throughout the city. And so today I'm going to highlight for you exactly what a pattern or practice investigation is, the 5 areas of the investigation as it relates to the City of Phoenix Police Department, a summary of the investigation to date, when we can expect the investigation to end and any next steps, and thereafter we will open it up, as Councilwoman Hodge Washington indicated, for questions, specific questions for PD will then be directed to Chief Sullivan, and if there are specific questions regarding the actual investigation and our interaction with the Department of Justice, then I'll step in and answer those questions. So, what's a pattern and practice investigation? Well, in 1991, following the incident involving Rodney King in Los Angeles, the U.S. legislature enacted a statute that allowed the Department of Justice to investigate police departments across the country if they believe that there have been violations of constitutional rights of
I apologize. I forgot to mention that we also have a Spanish interpreter. I want to make sure that if anybody we want to make sure everybody can follow along with the conversation. We also have the presentation in English and in Spanish if you want to follow along. I apologize for cutting you off. I just realized I did not mention that when I was giving my comments. So if you have not received the presentation and you want a written copy of it, just raise your hand and someone will come and get it to you. And if you need Spanish interpretation, raise your hand and we will make sure you're connected. My apologies for that. No problem. Thank you.
So if you need those, and they're also available online for you to go back if needed. So again, the U.S. legislature provided the Department of Justice with its authority to investigate police departments. And what that meant is that in order to ensure fair and lawful policing, the Department of Justice could identify police departments that they wanted to go in and investigate. And what that investigation looks like is that they are able to come into a city, which they did here in the City of Phoenix, study our officer training, review department policies, assess day-to-day operations. They do that through ride-alongs and interviews with staff, which they did. They identify accountability systems. How do we hold individuals accountable, whether it's through what most people understand as internal affairs. We have a different name for it at the City of Phoenix, but it conducts the same process, evaluation, the data, and how it's collected. interview the officers as well as city officials. I believe Chief Sullivan has been interviewed a couple of times. Observe officer conduct. They do conduct ride-alongs with the police officers, follow staff in other settings, like we have the CAP program that is administered through the fire department. They've conducted ride-alongs to see how we engage with members in the community who are unsheltered, as well as how those services are delivered. And also receive community feedback. The Department of Justice has reached out to various community organizations and have invited organizations to reach out to them, and that information is posted on our public-facing website. So this is just a few of the ways that they conduct those investigations, and these are the ways that they have conducted the investigation into the city of Phoenix. All right, so they identified in August of 2021 that they would investigate the city of Phoenix in the following 5 areas of the investigation, which included excessive force in violation of the 4th Amendment, discriminatory policing that violates the Constitution and federal law, retaliation against those individuals engaged in First Amendment or protected activities, violations of the ADA or the Americans with Disabilities Act related to behavioral health disabilities, and then the 5th area, violations of the rights of individuals experiencing homelessness with regard to disposal of their property. Even though those are the 5 areas, once they get in and review our policies and procedures, they are not limited to issuing findings beyond those 5 areas. So if in fact there is a findings report and there are other areas that I'm not mentioning here, they have that authority to, if they find it, they can include it in their investigation findings. All right, a summary of the investigation to date. We've produced over 100,000 documents, which totals over 1 million pages of information. We've provided them with access to systems and produced over 20,000 body-worn camera videos and over 200 recordings of 911 calls. They've conducted over 200 hours of ride-alongs with police officers in police vehicles. They've also observed numerous trainings at our police academy, interviewed over 100 city employees, and at the end of the calendar year of 2023, we had spent approximately $7.5 million on this investigation. Now, everybody has asked quite a few times, when will the investigation end? The DOJ has only made one additional request for information since December 2023, and that was very minimal, just for identification of some updated numbers, reporting numbers. The DOJ declined to provide an estimate to us on when the findings of the investigation would be issued. So right now, although they are not making actual requests, they still have not told us the investigation ends, and the likelihood is we will know when the investigation ends, when a findings report is released, or whatever their outcome of the investigation is. So, what's next following the investigation? And here are 2 possible outcomes of the investigation. The first being that after reviewing all of those documents that we produced, all of those interviews and other information that I referenced on the previous slides, they could find that there is not sufficient evidence of a pattern or practice of constitutional violations. At that point, they can provide what has been called a technical assistance letter, which would provide guidance and directions on where we can make improvements in the police department and continue to provide us with information on continuous improvement efforts. Or if they find that there is sufficient evidence of a pattern and practice of constitutional violations, the DOJ will issue a findings report. And we see this is what happened in Minneapolis, this is what happened in Louisville, Kentucky. So the findings report is issued, and this is where they spell out a number of things that they want us to address, as well as specific instances that they believe support those findings. After that, if they find that there is sufficient evidence of a pattern or practice of constitutional rights and violations of federal law, there are 3 scenarios. The first is that they issued a findings report, and then we began to negotiate what is called a consent decree. This is a contract that is enforced in court and usually is accompanied by a third-party monitor that will observe the work that we're doing in those continuous improvement efforts and make reports to the court about whether or not we're moving as they have directed or as agreed in the consent decree. And it would be monitored by the district court at the federal level. Scenario 2, they issue a findings report, and the city, if the DOJ is amenable, we could negotiate something short of a consent decree that may or may not include the federal district court and may or may not include a third-party monitor. We would agree it will require us still to implement documented changes with the potential of the third option existing in any of the first two. So we could enter into a consent decree, we could enter into some other agreement, memorandum of agreement or a settlement agreement, but ultimately in the third instance, they could issue findings, and if we can't come to an agreement, they have the right to file a lawsuit in the federal district court and sue the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department and take us into court. In that instance, they would be required at that point to identify the evidence that they believe supports the position that there's a pattern of practice of constitutional violations. And the other two, they are not required to show us or tell us exactly what in the documents we've produced that they've relied on to make those findings. Part of the ongoing investigation when Chief Sullivan arrived was that we would not wait until the completion of the investigation to start making changes. Changes to be more transparent, i.e. the community meetings, an opportunity to receive feedback. But even before that, there have been a number of changes that have been made, such as the crisis intervention teams of certified officers who are trained to deal with individuals who are facing crisis, mental health crisis, full deployment of body-worn cameras in 2019. City Council approved the Office of Accountability and Transparency in 2020, or OAT. The city also made a $15 million investment in expanding the Community Assistance Program in 2022. We have implemented the duty to intervene to operations orders in 2022 as well. So officers who see inappropriate behavior or things by their colleagues have a duty to report that. It is now documented in policy. As well as active bystandership and law enforcement, or what we call ABLE training and integrating communication and assessment tactics. Those are pretty big, long sentences and acronyms that provide additional training to officers of some of the new obligations that they've been trained on as to how to interact with members in the community to, as parents might say, use our words first before engaging in using force. And so these have been implemented, these were implemented in 2023, and again, Chief Sullivan will be able to speak to those in greater detail. And then the new use of force policy, the draft policy was approved only after it was made available for public comment. This was a first time for the city of Phoenix. Previously, policies were written and drafted internally, and there was no opportunity for public comment. And hopefully, you will see this as an attempt by us to be more transparent and have an opportunity for members of the community to have feedback on how we engage with members of the community. So all of these are things that have been implemented, many since the announcement of the investigation by the Department of Justice. And the next steps in the investigation, we're waiting on whatever the outcome. We've made a request for the full findings report, if issued, to be made available to members of the public. We've also requested that it is simultaneously released in a Spanish version, since there is a large Spanish-speaking population. We will post this to our public-facing website, so it will be available And we will come back and host additional community meetings for opportunities for us to discuss our response and have input from members of the community. As stated, all information regarding the DOJ investigation can be found here, including copies of the presentation, interactions with with the Department of Justice, a timetable of what we've done, how you can reach the Department of Justice, or how you can reach us should you have any questions or comments. This concludes my portion of the presentation, so I will open it up and allow Chief Sullivan to take questions. Do you have copies of the individuals? Did you want to speak before? Or we're taking the questions. Do you have any cards?
So we've only received one card so far. Oh, sorry. If you have a comment card, just go ahead and raise it up, and we will. Who is responsible for disciplinary actions if PSD will not discipline their own?
Well, certainly, we have.
Well, I apologize. Let's forget the question. I think it might be helpful if you share a little bit about your background and what brought you to the city of Phoenix in this role, and then we'll get to the questions.
Councilwoman, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I came here, it's almost been 2 years now, when Chief Williams decided to retire. And they were looking for somebody that has major city chief experience and also had experience working in police reform and with the Department of Justice. I came from the city of Baltimore, who was a city that was under a consent decree. I came there with a reform mandate with Michael Harrison, who came from New Orleans. I spent almost 4 years there implementing reform under a consent decree in the Baltimore Police Department. That experience is what brought me here to Phoenix, and I'm blessed to be here today. People ask me all the time, why did you come here? I really believe that I'm supposed to be here right now to help usher in the change that we're implementing with the Phoenix Police Department. So thank you for that. Thank you for a good opportunity to share that.
And I want to say thank you also to the chief publicly, because when I came back, so kind of how this came about was I attended several of the community meetings on the updates. And I felt like there were questions that were raised at the end of the meeting that I felt weren't answered. And I felt like the best person to answer them was Chief Sullivan. And the chief graciously, when I asked him, he said, yes, I can definitely come and talk to your community about this. And I think this is like one of the first important steps on moving toward a more collaborative process as best as can be in this situation. So thank you, Chief, and thank you each and everyone for submitting your questions and for being here tonight. So I will go to questions. There are no particular order. I'm not screening them. We're just going to ask you some questions. And if I ask your question and you feel like you didn't get the tone of it right, the goal here is to try and further conversation. If you feel like I didn't get your tone or I missed the note of what your question was asking, just raise your hand, and we'll do our best to clarify it. Is that fair? Yes.
And I want to respectfully acknowledge you, Councilwoman Kiesha Hodge Washington, for bringing this to the community, number one. I think you should give her a round of applause. And I was just wondering if you spoke to exactly what I was thinking, with the tone, since there's not many people in this room. Mark, can you just speak straight to the microphone to passionately express our questions? And we can follow up with a card for your documentation.
We can do that. I just was trying to keep some level of making sure, because what I've seen in the past without some cards is sometimes the questions run over. But what I could do is I could call you up, and we'll go wait on who submitted their card, just so it's some level of I respected the fact that you filled out the card. Okay? Thank you. So, Jose, I have your questions. Did you mind want to ask them?
Hello, everybody. Good evening. My name is Jose Aguirre. My question is, who is responsible for disciplinary action when the Police Standard Bureau will not discipline their own, as I was told by them?
Certainly, I don't know the specific case you're talking about, but, you know, when we talk about accountability for the police, it comes in many different forms, and it depends on the nuances of each situation. Certainly, there's potential criminal liability for a police officer, depending on what their actions are on the street. And that's due to, you know, a criminal investigation will occur, the county attorney will review and decide whether charges could be filed. Certainly, there are opportunities to submit complaints to the Professional Standards Bureau to be able to deal with administrative policy violations that are made. We also, in the city of Phoenix, have the Office of Accountability and Transparency. If you feel that that you're not getting the answers you need from the PSB, or the Professional Standards Bureau, then there's civil litigation, and that's always another way to hold us accountable as a police department.
So if OATS is a new program that's supposed to look for what the police is doing wrong, I was told that they only give opinions. They have no way of enforcing anything. They just give opinions to the police department or Police Standard Bureau of what they did wrong, what could they do better. They have no control of, hey, you know what, you guys got to do this or not. So, I mean, how does that pretty much is, you know, irrelevant to anything else that we're trying to give you guys. Because if I was told that from Police Standard Bureau that they don't discipline their own, even though I have evidence of grand jury indictments where the officer committed perjury, and I give them the documents, and they don't want to investigate because they tell me they don't want to discipline their own. How does that? And then OATS is supposed to be waiting for the documents from PSB. PSB won't give them anything. So how are they supposed to work?
And you know, I think we've talked about it. It's hard for me to talk about specific cases here this evening, but I can tell you I sign disciplinary findings report and issue discipline on a regular basis. Have done numerous times in the last couple weeks for a variety of cases. I can't speak exactly to your case, but certainly can refer you to one of our members that are here that can assist you to get more information.
Yeah, I mean, we can have a little bit more transparency. I mean, you should be more available to the community and vice versa. I mean, the council members, I've spoken to District 4, I've sent a bunch of emails to all council members. I mean, she said she was not hearing it, but there's no response, there's crickets, there's quiet. So, I mean, there needs to be some kind of transparency, there needs to be accountability for all the stuff that's going on. I mean, I know you're new, I know she's new, but let's all work together, and then we'll have a trusted police force that we can trust. Because right now, obviously, there's a big opinion of everybody, and we're trying to find out what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I have your question for her back so we can follow up? And yeah, and I also wanted to, and I'm speaking to TJ Martin, I want to make sure that you understand the role of both, and we'll make sure we get that information over to you as well.
So Chief, you said that you handed out.
Can you, so everyone can hear you?
So you said you handed out some disciplinary action. Can you give us some examples of a punishment that you handed out, or a few punishments that you handed out, or is it just a docket pay? Is it, you know, a day off of work, or can you give some examples of that?
I mean, there's been, you know, discipline is handed out, whether it's training, whether it's letters of reprimand, whether it's time off, whether it's termination from the department. I've done all since I've been here. You know, it depends on what the investigation shows, and I always tell the team I do what I believe is the right thing to do, and I'm going to be guided by that. Let me be perfectly clear. I have no ties to this department. I came from outside. I came in here by myself. There is nothing. I don't have relationships that have been built up over 30 years. I'm here to do what's best for this community and make difficult decisions. I always tell folks, if I make a decision, I make everybody mad, I probably made the right decision. And I've made a number of those decisions since I've been here, across the entire spectrum.
The next question we have is from Brian Hunter. Brian, did you want to ask your question? Okay.
I wanted to just address the nutshot one investigation. And I was at the George Floyd protest, and I was just documenting a spent gas canister. And I was shot in my lower gut with a gas ball or a beanbag or something, whatever it was. And I had my hands up, and I was backing away, and I got shot again in the thigh. And I've never been able to report this to the Department of Justice or anybody that's involved. I don't know what to do about it.
You have not reported to the Department of Justice?
No, every time I report anything, I get stolen all.
I mean, I believe there was, and I was not here, obviously, when that occurred a number of years ago. I understand there was an investigation internally with the police department. There was discipline that was handed down in that case, is my understanding. But certainly, I would say, if you want to tell your story to the Department of Justice, I would encourage you to reach out. And TJ?
That information is on the webpage, and actually you can see midway to provide feedback, give input, or find out more about the process. You can contact the DOJ directly at the 866 number, and there's also a DOJ email address on our public-facing website. So you can go to phoenix.gov/DOJ, and there's exact information on how to contact the DOJ as well as city staff.
Thank you.
The next question is anonymous. Can you touch on a few of the ways that the $1 billion plus budget will be allocated?
Well, I can tell you that the budget is allocated almost 90+% of it is personnel. And that's, standard all the way across every police department that I've worked for. Over 90% of it is personnel as we allocate budgets. Obviously, that's working very closely with the members of City Council to make sure that they hear the voice of community. I believe that is going on right now with community budget meetings to make sure that we get out there and work with the community to be able to hear their voice and how that budget is going to be allocated. There is very small room in that budget for us to do things outside of that. I can tell you one of the things that I've been focused on since I've been here, and they were focused on it before I got here, was finding ways to civilianize or bring more professional staff to the police department. I saw that in my last department that I worked in, having folks that come with a different lens, a civilian point of view, when they're part of the discussions and in the room, when those discussions are had, you come to better decisions. It gives you a much more rounded perspective when that happens. And that doesn't include just line level personnel. We talk about police assistants who you see out there who do a fantastic job, but you also see civilian police investigators that we have out there working side by side with detectives. But also in my administration, my chief of staff is a civilian. I'm not opposed, and one of my assistant directors on my floor, who recently just retired, and I'm in the process of replacing, and has my ear every day, is not a sworn member. I think it's important to have that non-sworn perspective across the department, and the more we can infuse that, I think we come to better outcomes overall.
So that personnel will include training for mental health, for de-escalation. Will that include that?
Yeah, we have personnel that we were
Phoenix Police Department.
curriculum
You can
writers.
hear me say
I had
yes.
police officers that were writing curriculum. That is probably not the best place for a thing for a police officer to do. There's professionals and educators that do that. We have a PhD level administrator down at the training academy that evaluates how we implement training. We certainly want to make sure that we have CIT trained officers or crisis intervention trained officers, because we don't want to go to those calls that we don't have to, and if we do, we want to be equipped to be able to deal with them. Right now, we are in the middle of what is called ICAT training. It's a training that I brought, that I saw immediately after I got here as something that we needed to implement. And it's a training where we deal with those situations where we deal with folks that are armed with things other than firearms. Firearms brings a different, it's a different situation when somebody has a firearm. But when somebody has a knife, when somebody has some other object other than a firearm, and there's other options for us to be able to resolve that situation and de-escalate it and send everybody home safely. And that's the purpose of that training. We're in the process of training the entire department in that right now. I think the last numbers I got, we've trained close to 1,000. I'd have to get you there. I don't want to tell you a wrong number, but that will be done this year, where we have trained the entire department in that training process. And it's a best practice. It's an evidence-based product. It's an evidence-based training. The only evidence-based de-escalation training that I'm aware of.
Thank you, Chief. The next question, Diana Barker, who said, what is RAP? R-A-P?
Thank you, Councilwoman. CAP.
Oh, CAP.
Yes, CAP. It has to do with community. I just would like to say that I've gotten to know Chief Sullivan, and having lived downtown, I, have seen some good and bad in the police, but overall, the City of Phoenix still is my favorite police. They've helped me out from different things. So I want to thank you for that. And I've helped the city in their security. They said, you're helping us protect the police. So. But CAP, that has to do outreach with the community. What is that?
It's actually a program out of the police, or out of the fire department, and it's dealing with those situations that police don't need to be involved in. Whether it be mental health situations, where we can go out with somebody, a resource other than police, because for years and years, I think it's something that I've always wanted. But when you call 911 and there's only one resource that's out there, it's police, that's who gets sent. And we put police officers who are many times young people with very little life experience. Let's be honest, when you bring on a young officer that's 21, 22, 23 years old, and their lens of what they've seen over their life is much different than what somebody like me who's been doing this for a very, very long time. And but in those situations that we can use that resource is very important. In addition to CAP that we send out there, we have a robust relationship with Solari and our nonprofit partners. We have people that sit next to our communications operators and help us divert calls. We divert thousands of calls every year to different partners. If somebody's in mental crisis, if we can send them to a mental health line, if we need to make a response and there's no need to have the police come, we make sure that CAP can respond in those situations. And then finally, the layered response of our crisis intervention team, trained officers who have an additional layer of training on how to deal with situations involving mental health that have an element of safety that require the police to respond. So it's a layered response. It's a good one, and I can tell you from the departments that I have been in and what I've seen, what we're doing here is the right thing. We've had people from around the country come and see what we're doing here in Phoenix when it comes in the space. This is not easy work, and it won't be accomplished overnight. But we are on the right track when it comes to how we are dealing with this. Mental health and you know, if it comes up later, anything that has to do with unhoused folks, those aren't crimes, and they shouldn't be crimes. I mean, I think, and I can tell you from personal experience, I have family members, very close family members, who have struggles with mental health and have been unhoused. And, you know, when I see these situations and I see people criminalize things that we need to lead with services, that's always going to be the way that I push this department. That's the way the city sees this challenge that we have. And we're going to continue to push that way. I know that's the guidance that we get from our city council members as we talk regularly.
If I may just add one comment about the CAP program, Chief Sullivan referenced that it is a call diversion program. So instead of us responding with the police department, we have, I believe, 15 vans of individuals who are trained to deal with people, unsheltered people and people facing mental health crisis, and by having them respond citywide almost 24/7 now. I think that we were pending some finalized hiring to ensure that that service was going to be available citywide 24/7. But we are leading with services for those individuals. So instead of police department being called out to deal with someone who's unsheltered, who's in front of a building or someone's business or home, instead of calling the police department to respond to that situation, we call CAP. And CAP, those individuals in that van can provide a meal, they can provide identification of services available to get them off the street, be it drug treatment or other housing, temporary housing, long-term housing, but to connect them with services so that we can put our sworn to actually protecting the community where there is a crime and placing individuals with knowledge of the services available directly to the people who need it. So that is the purpose of the CAP program, community assistance, extending assistance to those individuals, whether it's mental health or shelter.
You pretty much captured what I was going to summarize in one. Just make sure we were using the acronym CAP and making sure everyone understood what that meant. That's a community assistance program. It's being run out of our fire department. It's actually something that voters approved when they did our $500 million bond in November. So that's one of the things that's also being extended. So part of this is an educational component of it, making sure that we know that we have these resources available. If you have a situation, you're not always forced to call 911 or the police department to respond to those. Was that your last question?
That is an improvement over coming out and shooting.
Yeah, shoot to kill.
Thank you. The next question I have is from Deidre Hale.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for the right to speak. Real quick, Ms. Martin, I just want to understand your role. Do you work for the Phoenix Police, the city, the state, or the DOJ?
I'm an employee of the city of Phoenix.
Thank you. My question is a little more about metrics to Chief Officer Sullivan. So I wanted to know if you have metrics that show the improvements that are implemented, or what, do you see trends changing, not just for the improvements implemented, but also we'd like to see the statistics for the punishments that have been handed out.
So, let me tell you, one of the things, and we talked about it earlier, was the use of force policy. One of the other first things, in addition to ICAP, that I saw that I knew that we had to do was improve our use of force policy. I know what a best-in-class use of force policy looks like, and we had some challenges here. We didn't clearly define levels of force. So when I asked for those metrics, I couldn't get them because we didn't have clearly defined metrics to put in different buckets. So there were some things as we put together this use of force policy that I said we absolutely have to have. And one of them was 3 buckets of how we characterize uses of force. A level 1 is a very minor use of force without injury. Level 2 is where we use different tools or there's some sort of injury cause. And level 3 is those most serious uses of force. Clearly defined, and we would investigate each of those uses of force separately, and then we'll be able to categorize them and put them in the correct buckets. We're in the process of training our entire department right now. I've done some things that were not done before I got here. When we talk about use of force training, many times, here's how policy was changed in the police department. We'd go in a back room and there'd be some people and they'd write down the changes in this policy. They wouldn't talk to anybody. They'd look at best practices around the nation. But then it would go out and say, hey, officer, you have, here's this significant policy change in how you do business, and look at it, sign it in 15 days. This significant policy change you're going to be held accountable to. And what I can tell you is that's a failed way to do business. It's not fair to the community. It's not fair to the officers that we're going to try to hold accountable, and it's not the way that you change culture and you drive the change that you expect to be driven in. So with that, when I came and I said, we're going to do this updated policy change, and we're going to get public comment. That was another wide-eyed thing because we've never done that here before. 800 public comments that resulted in changes in the policy. And you know, because each, you know, this policy has to be what's right for this community, and it's a little nuanced here or there. So 3 buckets is what I said we have to have. And then the other thing I said, when we use force, it has to be necessary, reasonable, and proportional. That's a standard that is higher than what the Supreme Court says that it needs to be. And I said, those are the 2 things that I'm not moving on. Necessary, reasonable, proportional, 3 levels of force that we can actually be able to put out there. So those things are part of the policy. We're in the process of training every member of the department in the policy and plan to have that be able to roll out in Q4 and then be able to get metrics. The other thing that this department has not had is a robust records management system. The one we have is probably, it's the core to what we do as a police department, being able to provide reports to the public. It's antiquated. It doesn't allow us to pull data the way it should be pulled. And we are mandated by the federal government to summary statistics before. Now which means we would look at only the most serious crimes. So let's say there was a murder, but during that murder there was a robbery and a theft of something else. Only the highest crime was actually noted when we would report those summary statistics. Now we get, with the new system, we're going to be able to get much more robust crime data to be able to do that. On the discipline side, that is one thing that I've charged the team with, being able to put out publicly, what is going on, because I think internally and externally that there's not awareness of what is going on, except for those very high-profile cases that make the news, where we take action. So, look forward to being able to put that out and be transparent with where we are on that. So those are all things that we are working towards, as we go forward. Thank you so much for the question.
Thank you. The next question is from Sandra.
Chief Jones,
Yes.
I just need some clarification. I am so happy to be here, and thank you all for taking the time out. Because you have been live. Thank you very much. But, so I just want to make, from your presentation, you had initially said there was no sufficient evidence of any patterns.
No, ma'am, I said those were the 2 scenarios that could result from the investigation. So
Okay.
it's think of it like a trial. If just to simplify it, the prosecution puts on the evidence, and either somebody can be found guilty or not guilty. That's a very high level simplification. So once they complete the investigation,
So they haven't completed it,
Correct.
we're still waiting for the completion.
yes, ma'am. But those
Okay, that's
are,
what we're about to wait. I'm trying to figure out.
no,
So we're still waiting for the completion. We're hoping to get that within the next year.
they refuse to provide us any indication of when we can expect that information.
But in the meantime, we've created things to improve.
We're working, as the chief indicated, we're working on policies right now. We're training officers right now. We're pulling them off the street, as he indicated, for the first time to train them on these new policies. We're writing new policies. We're posting those policies for public comment for the first time. We're opening up dialogue to have members of the community give us feedback on those policies. So absolutely, we're engaging.
Okay, that's good engagement. And the CAP program, sooner or later you're looking to see did it work or did it not work, right?
As the chief indicated, right now, we've reported that we have seen a constant increase in the number of calls diverted from the police department to those who are driving those cap vans and issuing services, to the tune of 600 to 1,000 calls per month are now being reduced from the police department to these individuals who are trying to help individuals in the community, and we can only hope that those numbers will continue to grow.
Oh, okay.
To the cap, to the diversion to cap, yes, and less to the police.
Yeah.
Exactly, like this,
Oh,
yes.
okay, all right, thank you.
You're quite welcome.
The next question,
Who's that in?
Marty Winkler. I can ask it. Oh, there you go. Okay. Are you gonna come? Do you want me to ask it or?
Would you mind if I go a little bit later?
Sure. Thank you. The next question is from Kat J. Do you want to ask your question? You want me to ask it? Oh, there you go.
I'm a victim advocate, so I work with families who've been impacted by homicides, people who are experiencing the worst time in their life. What I have seen from working with some people in the Phoenix area, particularly on the south side, is that they're not getting the resolution they need within their investigations. I've gone down to the Phoenix Police Headquarters and sat in one of these meetings with them where they were recording the family. I find that very concerning as someone who is there to advocate on behalf of the family and be an observer as a third party, making sure that their needs are getting met. This is a serious concern because it's happening to predominantly Black and Hispanic families. I'm concerned that this is a trend that I'm seeing, and I'm pretty sure it's not isolated. I'm concerned about what your ability is to see that, see if there are patterns within your investigations of unresolved cases and kind of what that follow-up looks like for families, ensuring that their victims' Bill of Rights is being enforced and that they are being told that they have rights and have the ability to consult with the police and get timely answers back.
First off, thank you for your work. It's incredibly important to make sure that we stay as a victim-centric department and we focus on victims and getting them the information that they need. If there are situations specifically, I certainly would encourage you to report those in one of two ways. You could certainly go to OAT, and so we have visibility of that. So if you don't have confidence within the police department or our public standards bureau, to make sure that we do get a chance to get visibility of it. Because if it's not reported, no, I won't have visibility of what's going on. We certainly are focused on making sure that victim advocates and the victims get the services that they need. And I've been in a number of meetings since I've been here. We just opened up our new Family Advocacy Center, which really focuses on domestic violence situations, sexual abuse, child abuse investigations, to really have a one-stop shop where we make sure that we can not traumatize folks, because we know if people have to talk about things over and over and over again, that's the case. But certainly, if there are specific cases and concerns, we need to know about those. And either of those two routes would be the right way to be able to deal with those specific situations and then begin to see if there is a pattern of practice or if these are situations we need to rectify.
I would just say that my concern is that OAT doesn't seem to have any authority. I know that this has been raised and with the previous person in charge of OAT stepping down and providing a lot of feedback in his testimony that OAT has not been empowered to actually do something. I think the concern for families and people like myself is that we're talking to a wall that is not going anywhere. And the family that I am working with is here, a member of that family is here tonight. So if there is somebody available to talk with them, I would seriously advise that that connection happen so that they can at least talk to somebody who has some authority over the police who have been overseeing their investigation.
So, and I'll address the state legislature took moves after the city proactively created an investigative body to investigate the police. And the state came in and made state law that the city obviously has to follow when it comes to that. That does not mean just because they don't have investigative authority that they don't have the ability to intake. In this situation, they also have the ability to mediate. We've mediated a number of cases, where we've been able to sit down with a mediator and talk about different situations. So that's another part of what OAT can offer. And it's transparency because they're following up with our investigations and they're beginning to release reports on a regular basis. And you'll start to see that. So if we have, I have my executive assistant chief over there, and you can connect with him later today.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more follow-up question based on the question she asked? I want to make sure, was your concern whether or not the reporting was discretionary, or was the recording of all the families that are talking, is that at the discretion of the interviewer? Is that kind of your question? And they're exercising that discretion in a manner that's only seems to be done I want to make sure I understand the context.
The family didn't consent to being recorded,
Okay.
and were not informed that they were going to be recorded in that.
Okay.
From my understanding and training of being a victim advocate, that is against what victims' families should be experiencing. I was recording as well as they were, but Arizona is a one recording way state, but this shouldn't be what it has to be for families who, this is a homicide. This is, they were told there was a county attorney present there as well. This was not a traditional meeting with a family who's grieving, asking follow-up questions. The encounter was hostile, and it was concerning from the fact that there was no translator available for the family, and it was egregious.
Thank you for clarifying. Can I get your card so I can make sure we follow up with you on that as well? Thank you. I'm going to have your card in a second. My next question is from LeJoan Cousin. Sorry.
Good evening, Officer Sullivan, Chief Sullivan and Councilwoman, thank you. I have a quick question. 2, can a resident, when we have an issue that is really non-criminal, can we request the dispatching of a person of color, police officer?
It's all going to depend on, who's available at the time. You certainly can request, it could take much longer, depending on, who we have working at that time. But if that is something that you feel more comfortable with, you certainly could do it. But given what the situation is, it would just be fact dependent in that situation of whether we could do that. Now, that being said, I always encourage people to know the officers that work in the areas that they work in and develop those relationships. So if it is one of those opportunities or situations that's a non-emergency and you have a relationship developed with somebody that you feel comfortable with, that's a great way. It's called what we call community policing. We want the community to have those relationships with folks that work in the areas that they work in. But I don't want to make promises to you that we can't keep.
Yeah, I just wanted to know if that was a request that a president can make. I live here in the South Phoenix area, and I had a situation where I needed to call the non-emergency line. First thing that happened is it was like 4 police cars showed up in my yard. 4, this is a non-emergency. first person who came to my door was a young Caucasian police officer, so I understand what you're saying about their inability to really deal with real-life situations. The first thing he did was that, he said, "Who are you and why did you call us?" I immediately said to him, "Excuse me, I don't want to speak with you. I'd like to speak to the other officer who's next to you." So the other officer was an African-American police officer, and he graciously allowed me to communicate with him and allowed the new standby guy to kind of watch how he did things, because it could have been ugly. I was nice, I was friendly, I was pleasant, you know, so if I had not been that way, it could have been different. And then my other question is, you know, with our elections coming up in November and all this kind of crazy stuff is going on around the world, will the police department have someone dispatched to the different voting locations, since it looks like we might not be able to do mail-in ballot? So that's just my question to you. Will you all provide some type of security at the different polling locations?
So certainly that duty is something that the Sheriff's Department does. But we don't want to give the impression that we're suppressing the vote at all, because we know that this uniform sometimes makes people uncomfortable. So the last thing we want to do, unless there's a specific threat, is be present at those locations. That being said, we want to provide safety to everybody. We continue to look at if there's any specific threats, work with our other law enforcement partners to see what that is, and we'll be a partner in whatever that is. But we're also sensitive to what this uniform could mean to some folks when they're going to the polling place, and we want to make sure that they don't feel inhibited to going because of anything the police would do.
Well, thank you for clarifying that. I didn't know it was handled by, Mr. Pinzon was gone, but anyway, by his office. And then my last question is, why aren't police reports automatically generated? I had to have an occasion where I was out of state and my security system went off and the police were dispatched, and by the time I came back to Phoenix and tried to do a follow-up so I don't have to pay this fine, there was no police report to reference. Because you normally have to contact your security system provider and give them the police report number so you don't have to pay that fine. So how come they don't do police reports for every dispatch?
Well, there's different reports that are out there. So there's what we call IR numbers or report numbers that you get for each and every incident. So each and every incident's tracked, and that's in our computer-aided dispatch system. And then there's actual police reports reporting criminal activity that officers would author. So depending on what you were looking for, it could be different in each situation. My executive assistant, if you need anything specifically now, we'll make sure that we do that. So that there are reports. It's just different types of reports that are generated for different types of events, if that makes sense.
It doesn't, because if a police is dispatched, there should be a report number, correct?
There's different numbers. If they're dispatched, it's what we call, it will be a number in our CAD system, our computer-aided dispatch, and the notes will be there, and depending on what happens, the officer may not have to author anything else. It might be all captured in that system, and you just have that one number. There could be a separate number if there's a criminal report. So say there's a burglar alarm at the house. That number is generated if we get there and there's a burglary that has occurred. That would take a further investigation and would have a different type of report rather than just a report where we got there and it was, say, a false alarm.
Right, so there's no false alarm reported that they could have given me, so I didn't have to pay that fine.
It's $100.
That's it.
You got it? You get one free.
That's my question.
Thank you.
The next question is from Sandra Netkin.
So I got two questions. So my first question is, I want to know why the department, like, I know they talked about mental health a little bit, but I want to know why they, like, target people with mental health issues with, like, personal bias and aggression. Because I've seen, you know, videos and I've heard incidences, you know, people, you know, they have a bad day. I'm a mental health activist, so, I mean, you know, I've heard stories, I've met people, you know, mental compromisations and stuff. And I just want to know, why isn't there more de-escalation and more, you know, transparency when it comes to stuff like that? Because, you know, just because people are in a crisis, that don't mean that they should be hurt or killed. I mean, there's a lot of stigma going around mental health, and it's sad when, you know, communities like, oh, those people, oh, they're mentally ill, oh, they don't matter. It shouldn't be coming from a department that is trained and has programs and stuff that can help with that. But I just want to know why that stuff's been going down lately.
And thank you for your question. You know, I think I spoke earlier. This topic touches me personally, like very personally, very close to members of my family. I mean, immediate members of my family. So that's, I think, why my vision is what my vision is when we talk about this. It's, mental illness is not a crime. Certainly there are times that police, and I'm not going to sit here and make any sort of assumption that we act good all the time, and you'll never hear me say that. And one of the best things that we have about body cameras is that we have the opportunity to go back and review. You know, because before that, it was a report that was written, and it was one-sided, and that's all you had. And there was no way, as management, as supervisors, that we could go back and see what happened in those incidents and make improvements, hold ourselves accountable if we didn't act appropriately. That's why it is so important, as we talked about the CAT program earlier, to make sure that we're getting services to people when we need to get them services. That's why we want to make sure that we have trained individuals that are focused on de-escalation. And I talked about the ICAT training that our folks are going through now that deals with many of those elements. Certainly we're not perfect, but it is something that we will continue to work on every single day, and that's the commitment that I think I've shown since I've been here. But I'm not going to say that there couldn't be something going on right now that we're going to have to address, but we will.
Right. I have one more question. How are you guys handling the violence that towards the community? Like, I think I heard a little bit of, you know, questions about transparency. Confronted by cops, you know, cops can be very aggressive, physically aggressive, and even go as far as, you know, shooting and killing people. How is that being handled? Is that being handled? Because there have been times where I've seen stuff I reported to the Public Investigation Bureau, or PSB, and sometimes I don't get a response back, which I'm going to assume is normal. Or sometimes the cops in my neighborhood, you know, they like gossip about like reports being made and stuff, which isn't okay with me, because, you know, it's not the high school lunchroom. Okay, we're not here to gossip. I just want to know what is gonna come about, you know, change with that, because it's just, people are becoming statistics these days, and we're not statistics, we're human.
No, I think that's why it's so important that we have our critical incident videos that come out. You should see those come out at any time that we are involved in an officer-involved shooting. We release video at the beginning of the incident. The media has access to the complete videos to make sure that the public sees what occurs in those situations. Then a criminal investigation occurs and an administrative investigation on the other side of that. So being able to have transparency around that, those videos are produced within 14 days of the incidents after they occur, to make sure that the community sees what's happening. It is critically important, and there's no faster way we can lose trust with community is misusing force. So, those are some of the things. If you have specific incidents, like I said, my executive assistant chief is here. Would be more than happy to make sure that he gets any follow-up information he can provide for you.
Okay. Can I get your question? The next question is from Jesus.
My name is Marty Winkler. I'm an extreme victim of psychopath, violent, serial criminal predator officer Jason Gillespie, who almost killed me with his bare hands when I called police for help almost 10 years ago. Phoenix Police in the city of Phoenix has done everything in their power to cover up this unspeakable act of violence on an innocent, unarmed senior woman who simply called the police for help. Chief Sullivan knows all about it. I saw him at the Phoenix Gate event, and he ran from me. He ran from me. A grandmother with her bludgeoned head sign. How threatening is that? How threatening is that? A grandmother with her bludgeoned head sign. He fractured my skull in 4 places. Fractured from the back of my skull to the base of my skull. Almost lost my eye. Traumatic brain injury, brain hemorrhage, and acute subdural hematoma. Almost dislocated my jaw. He said it. Jason Gillespie said in his report. She fell and cut her head and lost her balance. And every single one, from the bottom to the top, have been part and parcel of a cover-up. And you know it, Chief Sullivan. You know it. You ran from me at the game event. A grandmother with her bludgeoned head sign. Shocking. Where is your transparency? Where is your accountability? I have been fighting through 4 attorneys to the 9th Circuit Court. I was appointed one of the best law firms in the country. Pro bono, Gibson Dunn, who represents Facebook Meta, took my case for free and worked relentlessly and valiantly for me. Joe Edmonds, my God-given earth angel, against the evil attorney for the city of Phoenix, Kathleen Weineke, who fights many of these big cases, along with Georgia Stanton. They are the ones that are getting rich. They are the ones that are getting rich that your taxpayer dollars are going to. Fighting victims like me. A few of these people get settlements, but many of them are all swept under the dirty blue rug and the blue wall of silence, extreme corruption, conspiracy, and extreme cover-up. Lies and deception and false narrative. They said that I was fighting with him and I was twisting and turning my body, and he was trying to protect me. He was enraged from the very first moment that he showed up. He only said to me two partial sentences. What do you want? And what do you want? And you called 5 times since I've been on my way. He was enraged, literally, that he thought I called too many times. And he was going to teach me a lesson I wasn't going to survive or I wasn't going to forget. And they have done everything, all of them, for almost 10 years. And you wouldn't think someone who looks like me.
That was 2014, Vice Captain come out to 2019.
Ms. Winkler?
Yeah.
Wait, we're not going to visit, we're not going to go back and forth. Thank you. Is there a specific question you have?
My question is,
Let me finish, please. Let me finish, please. in order, because we still have a list of questions, I don't want to make it seem like I make it short of your situation, because I'm not. I am very sympathetic, I understand where you're coming from, but I also want to make sure that we honor everyone else's time that came here, and you had 3 minutes, and I didn't hear a specific question for the chief, and if you have one, I would love for you to
My
present.
question is, when is Jason Gillespie going to be arrested and fired? He's making almost $134,000 a year out at Desert Horizon Precinct while I survive on meager disability and permanently disabled. I was just standing over there.
Can I ask the chief to address it, if he can address the question?
You know.
That's what I said, if he can, he can.
Yeah, no.
It is an open matter.
My case is going to retrial in about a year, so look for it in the news.
And as I mentioned when I started, the rules for this discussion is we could not talk about specific pending cases. And unfortunately, your matter is still, let me finish, your matter is still a pending case. I have personally directed you to oath and connected you to them in order to file the complaint that you want. And we cannot go into specific cases right now, but please, can we ask
Okay,
executive?
I would just like to respond to that. They will only, I talked to Mark at the oath office. They will only take a complaint from 2022 fall to current, and all they can do, he said, is basically the same as filing a complaint with PSB. When I filed a complaint with PSB, they never even responded to me. Never even responded to me.
And I
That is how corrupt they
don't
are.
profess to know.
That is how corrupt they are from the bottom to the top.
Miss
To
McClure,
the top.
Can I answer? I won't profess to know the reason why you have not received an answer. What I will try to do is try to move this forward for you. As I connected you with oath, I will try and connect you with, you're saying no?
He said that they
Okay.
have no investigative powers, and he said they could not take a complaint from prior to fall 2022.
Okay. And you have, we will communicate after, we will connect after this, because I don't want to get into a back and forth. Thank you for taking the time to share this with us. And maybe this is a learning opportunity to see if we need to address the jurisdiction of oath and maybe have it provide some additional time. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. My next question is from Gwen.
Good evening, everyone. The first question I want to know is how often are police officers, or are they given any type of psychiatric examination, especially when they're involved in an officer shooting?
So if they're involved in an officer-involved shooting, before they come back to work, they meet with a mental health professional in those situations.
And if they're not, how often are they given one?
I want to make sure that I answer correctly.
So at the beginning, their mental evaluation was taken in the very beginning. Our new officers, as they come on, they're required to go one time before they get off probation. If they're involved in a shooting, they have to see a mental health professional twice before they're allowed back to work. All right, so new officers as they come on, we're all giving psych evals as we come on. Our newest officers, before they get off probation, they get another psych visit with a mental health counselor before they go, before they're off probation. And then if you're involved in a shooting, you have to see a mental health provider twice before you are allowed back to work after you're involved in a shooting.
And then my next question is, what is actively being done with the homeless situation, especially the encampments that are being set up, even by the residents. Just earlier today, I was driving south on 35th Avenue, I was driving north of 35th Avenue before I got to the Walmart, and there was an encampment right by a residence subdivision, and I called American Services. They gave me Phoenix Care, and of course I was the second person. Now I don't live there, but I was the second person who called it in. I mean, it's getting so, that's how bold it's been getting, where the encampments are coming to the residents on the property, and the fence, because there's a encampment, you can see it right off the street, and it was right by someone's home, but it was on where their fence is. It was on the opposite side of the fence. And one of the things that the lady said was, that the resident may be the one who's responsible for removing that person, and I'm like, okay, but homeless people, not saying all, if they were by my house, I don't think I should be the one who needs to remove them. And I thought that was sort of an odd answer, because sometimes drugs are involved and everything, so why would I be responsible for removing someone who's on the opposite side of my fence, even though, it's in my subdivision, but I shouldn't be the one who have to do that.
If I may, Councilwoman, the issue of unsheltered people is very difficult, and as we speak right now, arguments will be made before the U.S. Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit within the coming weeks about how cities can and cannot respond to unsheltered, because the guidance is we cannot criminalize people being unsheltered, right? And what the courts are saying is that people have a right to be in public places.
Well, this is private residence. I mean, this is just a subdivision.
If it is in fact on personal property,
yes.
So you can trespass someone, which remains a crime. So if there is a crime being committed, but as far as moving them from public rights of way, these are things that we're waiting for legal guidance on in order to be able to advise the police on what their role can be. But a trespass, if that person is on someone's property and you want them removed, then contacting the police is appropriate to have someone trespass. But someone setting up on a right of way, the city has to follow the rules of the court and how they are providing guidance as to how we respond.
You can't even go, I don't take the bus, but thank goodness I don't, because they're encamping on, you can't even, I see them on bus stops. Their carts, I understand that they can't touch, the police are no one can touch the carts. This doesn't make sense. I believe, the city needs to be more proactive than reactive. This has been becoming a problem. I used to work downtown. I worked for the county attorney's office. I was also a victim advocate, and I remember seeing all these homeless problems long before Councilman, even when Mike Johnson was in office. It's been going on forever, and it's just, it's how many Super Bowls do you have to have before you can move them? That shouldn't have to be. But that's how the city was doing it, and until some of these businesses were suing the city, that's when all of a sudden they were removed from that area near the downtown. But thank you.
Can I take a question? And I just want to chime in. I think the city is trying our best to operate within the rules that have been prescribed by us from the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. As TJ Martin mentioned, we do have, there is a conflict of law from, and I'm trying to put on my notes as I explain this, but there is a conflict as to what our abilities are as a city, and we have to follow what the current courts have told us are our parameters. We understand that sometimes for residents that's not fast enough, but we have to also respect what the court have established as the due process rights of our unsheltered residents, because they also have rights that we have to honor. So I would just encourage you to continue to report it so that we can start the steps to rectify it if it is, because sometimes we've seen situations where the homeowner has given the person permission to put up a lodge in there for a little bit. So we can't always assume that that is not the situation. We have to follow the steps. And if you have a specific question on how to report it, please see my team and we'll make sure we can do a case so we can follow that on for you to make sure that it's addressed. So thank you. The next question is from Carol Coles-Henry.
You can read it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The question is, the 2015 Community Police Trust Initiative provided 9 first-tier and 6 second-tier recommendations to enhance police transparency and community relations. The implementation plan was implemented Will you commit to continuing to update the community on implementation of the recommendation which relate to the work of the DOJ?
Thank you for that question. And, this goes to the continuous improvement work that was going on by Chief Williams before I got here. And the work of that group, it was critically important. And I think the work that we're doing right now speaks to some of those recommendations. We're committed to that. And yes, we will commit to making sure that we continue to stay focused on the work, because there was a lot of work that went into that whole process. I wasn't here for it, but I've been briefed on it. It's one of the first things I heard about when I got here.
Thank you. The next question is from AJ.
I can speak loudly from right here. Okay. Mr. Sullivan, I'm a whistleblower against corrupt prosecutors, a former member of the CBD who worked together to conduct fraudulent. Sure. So, Mr. Sullivan, I'm a whistleblower against corrupt prosecutors and a former member of your police department that worked together to conduct fraudulent investigations for personal gain. So before ABC 15 brought forth a case in which they attempted to frame innocent protesters for retaliatory purposes, there was my voice saying that the same thing was occurring. My question to you is, can you, one, confirm that you have made attempts to have the DOJ release their report to you first before it gets to the public, and then two, enlighten me in how you believe that fosters public trust?
Well, it's been my experience that the Department of Justice does not release those reports. There was an ask by our outside counsel for us to review for a factual basis. The Department of Justice will not and would not do that. And that's probably a best practice. That's something that is, it's another reason we asked for the report when it is released to be translated to Spanish. There was, conversations, well, we as a city could do that. But we as a city don't want to be responsible for trying to put in the translation that could be called to question. We want the Department of Justice's translation into Spanish in that situation. I can tell you that when the report is released, you'll get it at the same time that I get it. That's their course of business when they release these types of reports.
I guess I'm still not understanding why you make an attempt in a situation in which public trust has been violated to an extent where an outside agency has to come in and do an investigation on the organization. Why even attempt to see the report before it reaches the public? I'm trying to understand the reasoning and the purpose of that.
Absolutely. So what I've seen in other reports the Department of Justice have put out is there's factual problems with some of the report. And an opportunity to have the most accurate report possible, to be able to not fix the content of the report, but if there's factual differences that are present in the report, not to change the content. The Department of Justice would not allow us to change the report. The ability to do that so that the report has the most credibility it can out in the community, I think is something that could be done. That was something that was suggested by council, but it's not going to occur.
So just so I'm understanding correctly, you wanted to see their report, your department's being investigated, to make sure that it was accurate before it gets to the public?
I'm talking about factual points, dates and times, specific people. There has been in previous DOJ reports factual inaccuracies that were a part of those reports that were made public. It made it difficult internally and then externally with the community with some of those factual problems that were present in those reports. But
outside counsel who represents the city, who previously worked for the Department of Justice, made that recommendation. It did not come in from an internal perspective, but through his personal experience had identified, as the chief indicated, that there have been instances in which a report had been released and contained inaccurate factual information that once released to the public is hard to withdraw an inaccurate fact. And so it was not for the purpose of changing any finding, but to ensure that how they have recanted information in the documents that were provided and the information or the interviews that were conducted, that those were factually sufficient. Not for purposes of changing any of their findings or their recommendations, but simply to ensure that there was factual. That was not a Chief Sullivan recommendation or anyone in the city, but instead someone who has worked on these investigations in other jurisdictions, who had personal experience of the negative impact of releasing a report with information, with incorrect information. So, as Chief Sullivan indicated, that came from outside counsel and the request was declined, so it won't be done.
I just wonder if there's any disclosure, like a footnote, that it was reported initially like that. So, but the facts are this. There's not that, so that it is very transparent. That, it's anybody can surmise just the facts, ma'am. Okay, so you want to have the clear facts, but I think that it would be good if there was disclosure that the report came like this and there was a correction on it and it's disclosed in the footnote.
Yeah, but we don't write the report. The report comes, I want to make sure, have we answered your question before?
Yeah, and please understand, there was no allegation, I'm simply.
No, I want to make sure we answered your question and
You
understood.
did, thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Adora.
You can read.
Okay, perfect. Autism is very real. Many individuals suffering from autism, especially males, might act oddly, be very vocal, and potentially resist arrest due to their inability to understand what is occurring. How does or will the CAP and Phoenix PD handle such situations?
This is, I believe, Autism Awareness Month. We have officers that are wearing badges that recognize that, because autism touches the entire community, including officers and officers' families as well. This is something that has happened around the country where officers have come into contact with mostly children that have autism, and bad outcomes have occurred, and that's why training has occurred in the police departments and police departments around the country, including the Phoenix Police Department, and is regularly done with our new employees and employees going forward. That being said, we talked about CAP, we talked about Solari, making sure that we divert those calls that don't involve criminal activity, that involve mental health type situations, that we divert those to those other alternative means to be able to come to resolution. If we do end up on scene, and it appears that it's a mental health situation, we have CIT trained officers that can respond to those calls, who are very aware of autism and have received training in autism. And then additionally, the entire department has. So if someone comes into contact with somebody, being able to recognize what they are dealing with in those situations and make sure that we bring the right resources to be able to help in those situations.
Can I add something?
Yes, you may. Make sure you get it in the way so you can help here.
The reason I brought that up is because I know people personally who have children with autism. And at some point in their lives, they're going to want to drive. They're going to get the driver's license, they're on the road, and if they're pulled over, your average person pulled over is going to be frantic. I can just imagine someone who's suffering from autism not being able to understand and comprehend why they're being pulled over and what it is you want from them. And so it's like, I know we talk about CAP and mental illness and all of that, but there's got to be something greater with this whole mental illness tactic to deal with people who are, at the mercy of the law. They may resist. It may appear as though they're resisting arrest, that they don't want to give their driver's license or their, proof of car insurance and registration. So all of that, I just wanted to just say it to give you some context of a very real situation. Because oftentimes we talk about mental illness in this vacuum of, not specifics. But this is very specific and very real. And so that's why I wanted to add a little bit more to that.
No, thank you. And it, like I said, it touches everybody. I was at an event today. Officer was wearing the autism awareness badge that our officers wear. So it is something that not only do they experience personally, but we have been training for a number of years. 10 years ago, when we started really having several events that have happened around the country, the industry and law enforcement has picked up that we need to train in this area, and that's one of the areas that we have been training in and will continue to train in.
The next question is from Jacqueline.
Sorry, my phone went off.
I was arrested in the ACAB gang case. I know that no information can be released. It was targeted, specific, and violent, and it's an issue of culture that I never see changing. So I don't really see any solutions. All I'm hearing, I attended a presentation earlier, this year or last year, same presentation. I just hear that you're spending a lot of taxpayer money on essentially nothing. I know that community outreach, diverging and all that, but it's really defund the police, abolish the police, because it offers no long-term benefit to our community. And that's a personal belief of mine, and I know it's the very antithesis of your being, that you believe that you live with integrity, that you do work with integrity, but that is the complete 180 of your officer's culture. I ended up bruised and losing 120 pounds after that. There's not much to say, and it was covered up from the attorneys, the lawyers, everybody in that department that day, everybody who looked at those court documents, everybody in the court. So that's a fact. That culture is a fact. Ain't no changing that. I know there's nothing really you can say to Assange, or I'm not really asking you a question. I just want you to know that I'm still watching, I'm still listening. I'm going to advocate on behalf of me and my friends who are affected. We were put online because the falses were copy and paste charges, all 5 of them, that we were Hell's Angels. I studied chemical engineering. Far from a Hell's Angel, just even arrested somebody from Flagstaff that was just taking photos. What kind of due process is that? What kind of department is that? And I know there's no changing because every time there's a protest in the area, there's drones, undercovers. Y'all just don't like people who want good for this community. No question, just want to say that. Thanks.
Can I get your comment card? The next question is from Draymond.
Pretty much, I spoke with the DOJ. They asked me for just questions about how King's Police Department treats people and stuff like that. And I didn't have a bias. I pretty much let them know, I had bad experience, but also had good experiences. But my question is, how much power does the chief have? Because the officer was fired in my case. How much power do they have as far as firing is, like, say, if they have recommendations to keep an officer, but how much power does the chief have to step in and be like, you know what, I'm going to have to fire?
When investigations are completed, there are recommendations to me, and I get different recommendations. And if I believe that it's not the right thing, if I don't agree with the investigation, there's the opportunity for me to deviate from that. And it's something that I have done.
Is there any trainings that the officers are now having to take? I did hear some things, but diversity or like de-escalation trainings, or like you said, deciphering who's someone is under influence or someone with mental health, like how the trainings and stuff.
I've talked about a number of those tonight, but the ICAT training is one of the most, it's the only de-escalation training that I'm aware of that's evidence-based, that proves that it has better outcomes for community and better outcomes for officers and use of force situations. So that's something that is ongoing right now. We also are training our folks in ABLE, which is active bystandership training. When we look back to George Floyd, what would have happened if one of those officers would have stood in and said, no, this isn't right? They were young officers. So it was so important for us to make sure that if I'm misbehaving, if I'm doing something that I shouldn't be doing, an officer can tap me on the shoulder, can pull me away without fear of retaliation in those situations. So that's another training that we are currently involved in, and we've got about 2/3 of the department trained in that as well. Thank you.
Oh boy, that's a hard one. That's a hard one to change the mindset.
The next question I have is from Mike Johnson.
Thank you, Chief Sullivan, for coming out, Councilwoman Washington for taking the time and the opportunity to come out into the community to discuss some of these issues. Chief, my question is, will the police department prosecute officers who make a false report that's demonstrated and proven that they made a false report, just as any citizen who makes a false report can be prosecuted?
Prosecution obviously lies outside of the police department. The police department can provide facts to the prosecuting agency, whether that be the city court or the county court, and it's going to be the decision to charge is going to lie with that prosecuting agency. So is that something that can happen? Certainly. It's going to be up to the prosecuting agency, whether it be a city court, a county court, or potentially, a federal court.
Okay. The reason I ask is because the prosecuting courts never get that unless the officer write that report up and send it to them and request charges brought against. But I think that with cameras, with people videoing, that many times the community would have much more trust in the police department if there's an officer out there that's making false reports, not a one-sided report, but a false report that you may have video or some other evidence showing that that officer in his report made a false report. And my question is, if that case comes up, will the police department investigate and write up an officer who makes a false report?
If officers conduct misconduct, there will be an investigation and submittal. I've submitted a number of cases, not specifically one like you're describing, but submitted cases to the county attorney in situations. So yes, if there's misconduct that's found and we do an investigation, we will submit cases to the county or the city court, depending on their, we do that on a regular basis.
Okay. I understand the misconduct, but I'm really referring to false report.
Well, false report.
Would that come under misconduct?
That would be misconduct.
Okay, all right, thank you, Chief. And again, thank you, Chief, and thank you, Councilwoman, for bringing this to the community and taking the opportunity to come.
Thank you.
The next question is for Jose. It's from Jose.
Thank you, and I just want to follow up with what he said. I was in the situation where I had made a report on a detective because he's the lead detective, right? When he gets a search warrant and it says that the person involved in the shooting is a prohibited possessor, the guy's he has a firearm in his truck, runs to his vehicle, shoots at my brother shoots back in self-defense, and in trial he says, well, I didn't arrest the guy because I didn't know he was a 4-time convicted felon. Got a copy of the warrant, okay? Had copies of false information where he committed perjury in the grand jury indictment. And yet, on December 7th, in July, let's back up, in July of 2023, my brother was released from prison because we won the appeal in the Supreme Court. So he was released because he was innocent, okay? The detective and the prosecutors swayed the jury to convict my brother that he shot at the building, like if it was a drive-by, okay? So now, on December 7th, we went to go make a police report. We started going to the higher ranks, where every time we went to the police station, to the headquarters, we would have to give this report, okay? So what happens? There 2 hours, the detective who arrested my brother comes down, starts harassing me, intimidating me, says he's going to arrest me because I'm there trying to make a report. They told me, you better get the hell out of here or we're going to arrest you. I go to the District 4, Lower Pastures council member. I told him what happened. I talked to Jeff Benza. He said, give me the paperwork. I'm going to take all these evidence, take it to Police Standard Bureau. He took it to the Police Standard Bureau, who then was supposed to give it to Oates. I go to, I tell him, hey, can I have my paperwork? Jeff Benza said, okay, yeah, we have all the paperwork. They scanned it. You can pick it up at PSB. I go to PSB. We don't have any paperwork. We don't know anything. What the hell's going on? So they told me, well, go to Oates. They should have it. I go to Oates. They call me. We don't have anything. Then who are we going to, go do a police report against the guy who shot my brother because he's a 4-time convicted felon. Now the police now you guys are harboring a 4-time convicted felon who is supposedly a cartel. You guys are harboring him. He's free from the streets. And why are they protecting him? Because there's a 7-year statute of limitations. Within 7 years, he's going to be immune to any prosecution. Right? So I go to police, I go to the MCAO, I tell them, hey, police told me to come and tell you guys to file charges on this guy because he's a prohibited possessor and he shot at my brother and my brother's free now. So we're now turning the tables, we're going to press charges. Oh no, you have to go to the police station and the police has to make a report so we can make the charges. I go back to the police station, we're not doing anything. We're not going to file charges, we're not touching the guy. I go to PSB, we're not going to investigate. I said, this is why you guys are being investigated by DOJ, because this is corruption. That's your opinion, they tell me. I'm sure there's a lot of opinions here that there's something going on. Something going on. So, if you guys want transparency and trust from the community, you guys have to follow up with reports that are being advocated and presented to you guys. If you guys really want transparency, you guys got to get the bad apples out of the bunch. And you guys are not doing that. I see that. You guys are talking about PSB corruption in the prosecution office. I've had it. I have audio of the bribery scandal that's happening with this case. Okay? This guy is a big time, and we have drug problems. We got the blues. We got the blues. This guy is supposed to be a big time blues distributor, and your officers, Detective Todd Oliver and PSB, are protecting him. Okay? He's in the streets, carrying guns, dealing drugs. Prosecutor office, Cecilia Munoz, she knows about it too, to protect him. So we want just transparency. So I want. So who do I talk to about making a police report That's gonna get into the county attorney's office. That's gonna arrest this guy. Who do we trust now?
I think executive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had that conversation already out there.
I just wanna make sure.
Yeah.
Just wanna make sure.
I'm gonna get back with you.
Okay, awesome.
And can I get your card so I can follow up as well, as part of with your contact information on the card? You put it in your back pocket. Thank you.
So first of all, thank you, Councilwoman, thank you, Attorney Martin, thank you, Chief Sullivan, for putting this together, the staff, all the hard work you've done, thank you. My question is, I'm going to try and make it concise as possible because it's kind of in line with what they just talked about. The fact that there's a Department of Justice investigation shows that there's corruption in the police department. But I'm sure that the police department knew that before the investigation. Right? So what I'm concerned with and what I'm asking in transparency, a few things. One, what are some of the things that you've already noticed before this update comes back? What are some of the things that you've already noticed that are problems in this police department that needs to be solved? Some things you've already spoken to, and I'm aware of that. Just to give a little background, I was one of the organizers that helped with this current whole effort. I'm fully aware of what happened after we thought we won the victory in the council chamber. We found out later we had, right? So we know about some of these superficial things that have been done. But there's a culture in the police department that needs to be changed. And that culture...
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May your attention, please. Time is now 7:30. The library will be closing in 30 minutes. You need to call for a ride. Please respect this time. You need assistance finding or checking out material. Please see a staff member with the service desk. The computers will automatically log on 5 minutes before we close, so make sure to save and complete your work before then. Again, the library is closing in 30 minutes at 8 p.m.
Sorry about that.
Oh, no, I'm used to it. So the first question, what are some of the things you've already noticed outside of this update, transparently, that you're working to solve? What are some of the systems, policies, programs that you're going to put into place, thinking about putting in place to deal with the long-standing police corruption? Secondly, in terms of the call, what brought the Department of Justice here, the violence and corruption in the police department, do you know statistically the numbers of where that's at now? Since that investigation has begun, since it ended, has anything changed in terms of the number? Anything changed statistically? Where is the department at now, if that makes sense? So those are my two questions. I got one more question.
Let me take the first one of some of the things that we've been doing. You know, I talked about some of those efforts around the use of force policy. I did that because I saw that there was room for improvement. If there's anything that we need to make sure that we fix and do the best we can for a community, it's in when we talk about use of force. The other thing that is an ongoing project right now that I charged the team with is putting together an update of our systems of accountability. I believe there's room for improvement in our systems of accountability. Those are the systems that are in place, how we review the different things that go on that could potentially be misconduct, or review the actions of officers, so we find issues before they become problems, if that makes sense. Performance audits. So one of the things, just to give you an example, that I have the team working on. We talked about standards of public trust. That was one of those policies that was rolled out along with our use of force policy that's being trained right now. Some of you might be aware that it's called procedural justice. And it's this idea of how we interact with community. That when I meet you, I say, hey, my name's Mike Sullivan. I'm an officer with the Phoenix Police Department. I'm interacting with you because, and share the information, why we're having this interaction, and then I allow you to have voice in that situation. And then going to take some sort of action. That action might be something that you agree with or don't agree with, but I'm going to explain why I took that action. You know, what that's found to do, even in situations where I make a decision that is adverse to you, you feel fair, you feel heard. It doesn't make it necessarily any better, but if I have an interaction like that, it's much better. So how do we make sure that our officers are doing that, right? Performance audits. That we have these body-worn cameras when we have that interaction with community, that we can go through and we can audit and make sure that our officers are performing at that level. Those are the types of things that we're putting into place and building right now to make sure that we hold ourselves accountable. Can you give me the second question again?
Has there been any change? Have you noticed statistically any change from what you're implementing, all these things that you mentioned? Have you all actually seen a change in the office?
And that's
in terms of numbers, not
right. No, and numbers. What do they say? There's lies, damn lies, and statistics, and so sometimes you can frame them in different ways. And the problem with there's been so much change here recently. The ability for us to look at numbers, and because we're in the process of changing our use of force policy, right, with the different levels of force, how we measure it. Well, before that, there wasn't the ability to do that, and that's why it was so important to make sure that we have the ability to report out to community, to report out to me when force is being used, how it's being used, and have very clear reporting that is transparent to community. Quite frankly, we're not there. And we have significant improvement that we have to make in that area.
Because and I asked that question, and I thank you for answering the way you did, because the reality is on the streets we're not feeling it, right? And much of the same complaints that we had then, we have now. Many of the same problems we had then, we have now. And the community is keeping a very watchful eye on the Phoenix Police Department, and trying to, as you've seen tonight, make sure that the level of response meets the level of our pain. That makes sense, okay? And then I have a question for you, Attorney Martin. What is an inaccurate fact? What is that?
Wow, yeah, that's a good question. An inaccurate fact sounds like something that is not true, right?
I think the question is related to the request to see the DOJ.
Oh, okay.
Is that correct?
So, okay, just to ensure that how someone, you see this bottle, and the best way for me to do it, you may see oranges on the bottle. From my perspective, I don't see oranges, but we're looking at the same bottle.
Okay.
So in order to ensure that all the facts about the bottle are included in the report, we want to ensure that how they captured the information accurately reflects what is either in the document, what was testified to in an interview, those type of things. Because what we heard, they didn't record interviews. So if they are taking notes and you're taking notes of what someone has said, my notes may not align to the councilwoman's notes if an interview was not recorded. So we just want to ensure that in those instances that we capture the same information and there's no inconsistency in the accuracy of that information.
So to paint a picture, what you're describing to me is that Department of Justice is there, Phoenix Police, they're there, city representation is there. Questions are being asked, and on both sides, notes are being taken.
Correct.
And then those notes between the two are not shared.
Correct.
And then they go back and they do what they do with their notes.
And that's completely different from what our notes or our reporting.
Now this is interesting to me, because if I was under criminal investigation, right, and I'm taking notes on my criminal investigation, and you are the prosecuting attorney, and you're taking notes in my criminal investigation, then how do the person from the outside how is the determination made that my notes as a criminal, the one under investigation, I use that term, my notes as the one under investigation are to be compared to someone else's notes who's watching me, who's questioning me on a crime that I committed. So how do you know, how does a balance, how do you achieve a balance in that case? That makes sense?
It does, but you're asking a question about a recommendation that came from outside the city of Phoenix. So I cannot speak to the basis or their experience with that being an instance. That person's experience had been that there were opportunities to correct information and or statements made in a report. The City of Phoenix and our staff, we have not undergone this experience before. So in relying on our outside counsel, that was the recommendation that was made, and we followed that advice and recommendation. We understand that it may not seem reasonable.
It's a potential
we understand.
powder keg, right?
We understand.
It becomes a potential powder keg, right? Because if the department argues against, in any case, argues against the findings of the Department of Justice, then the community who's been victimized is naturally going to side with the Department of Justice. And so then what it looks like is a further effort of cover-up, a further effort of corruption, a further effort of avoiding the consequences and changing the culture that we are all here talking about that we want to change.
Yes.
Right? So I think that's a very delicate balance, right? And in the interest of transparency, I can't tell you what to do, of course, I'm a citizen, right? But it doesn't look well from the outside in that the city would want to have any position to challenge anything that comes from the Department of Justice. And that's just from outside looking in.
And totally, I hear you. I hear you 100%. When we talk about facts that could be different in a report, we're talking about the date something occurs, the location that something occurs, something that is caught, documented, written in a report that shows up in the report differently. And it's not to change the report, it's to point out, hey, we saw this or that. But to your point, that's why we're not doing it.
Okay.
Or the outcome of an investigation, because many of the cases or incidents that they're looking at, there's been an investigation, there's been discipline, there's been some type of outcome, training, suspension, a number of things that may have happened, and we want to ensure that that information is also captured in the report. We need people to understand that if there's been an investigation, that actions have been taken, but as the chief indicated, just wanted to ensure that that information is as documented.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. If you don't mind, thank you. Just want to keep track of everything because I am taking notes, but I want to make sure I get them all here. And then Warren Foster, question?
Chief Sullivan, this is my question. Do you think you're getting the support, man, that you need? You know, you got an understaffed police force, you got cars driving around with dark windows, and the cops don't even know who's inside, you know what I mean? It seems like, you know, some of the stuff you inherited. So do you really, I never hear the mayor saying anything about help the police. I don't hear the police union. You know, I don't hear, I know they pay dues, but I never hear them saying anything to push up the officers. So really and truly, you know, it's like you're on a one-way street because you're not getting the help that you need. So can you address that?
Well, I can tell you that the city provides an incredible amount of support to us. You know, the ability for us, one of the things when I came here, we talked about the challenges at our training academy, which is very important to police. When you talk about the morale of what a police officer feels like, and I went down to see what we have here in Phoenix, and it's different than every other city that I've worked in. And I have a perspective that is different than probably most because I've worked in 3 different cities. That being said, there's challenges. There's challenges in this world, and we will always continue to face challenges. And it's been that way for the 30 years that I've done this work. But I believe it's incredibly important work. I know we have officers that are dedicated. They go out every day to do the right thing. I also know that we're not perfect, and we have officers that fail. And we need to do a better job holding those folks accountable when we run into those situations. I'll stop there.
But what's going on with your recruitment, man? I mean, like, how many cops are you down? 300, 400?
More like, if you look at what our allocated funding is for, is $31.75. I think the last report I had, we were about $25.60 was about the last report we have. Now, what I can tell you when we talk about that is for the last 5 years we were losing people significantly. This time, where we are here today, we're sitting essentially at the same place we were this time last year. So we're not adding, but we've stopped losing people at the rate we were for the previous 5 years.
But do you think that something is missing in your recruitment process? I've said this one at coffee with a cop. I mean, you know, it's almost like a guy trying to get a hit record. You got to have people out there spending money to make it work. Do you think it's because of what you're putting down on the table with the money? Do you have the wrong people trying to solicit? Because, I mean, cops want to come out of San Francisco and Oakland and Berkeley and all that like nobody's business. I would think you would be trying to tap into that.
So, first of all, I would encourage everybody here that has
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, by your attention, please. Time is now 7:45. Library will be closed in 15 minutes at 8 p.m. You need call for writing, respect the time. You need assistance finder checking out material. You see a staff member in the service unit.
If you have
Balloting on 5 minutes before the close, so make sure to stay in the community work before then. Again, the library is closing in 15 minutes at 8 p.m.
So I would encourage anybody, if you have people that want to be part of the change, be part of the change. The way we bring people into this department is we need folks that are from the community to be part of the community, or part of the police department to be able to do that. So I just came back from a DOJ conference, which they invited. I was the only police department that was invited to this department, sat on a panel with people from around the country where we talked about the workforce of tomorrow in criminal justice. This challenge is not a challenge unique to Phoenix. Matter of fact, most major city police departments are facing some of the same challenges when we come, and we have to look differently. I talked about civilianization, civilian investigators. That's something we didn't have before. Increasing our PAs, who are these young women and men who go out there and take reports, take accident reports, but they're not full sworn police officers. Those are things that we're going to have to look at for the workforce for the future, because things are changing. I mean, when you went to the grocery store, when I was a young man, there wasn't self-scan. There is now. The way the market works is changing, and we as an organization are going to have to change as well and really look at how we do work and make sure that we're doing work as smart as we can.
And there's 2 more questions. I don't see the question askers, but out of respect for them taking the time to write the question, I'm going to ask the question for you. Is the lead detective assigned to a homicide required to go over or read an autopsy report before turning into general attorney's office?
Well, if you're a case agent on any sort of investigation, you're responsible for the entire investigation. I can tell you that I've never been a homicide investigator. I've been a detective in different areas, and if I'm turning over reports, I would review what I turn over to a prosecuting authority.
And then the last question, Phoenix PD has been cited by DOJ for a pattern of practice against, Phoenix PD has been cited by DOJ for a pattern of practice, usually a high level of aggressive force, What has Phoenix PD done to address this? Is there any data available which would identify a decrease in the patterns and practice identified by the DOJ?
So, that's what we're waiting on with the investigation, is for the DOJ to identify if they find a pattern of practice. That's the purpose of their investigation that's ongoing. When we talk about use of force, I think that's why it was one of the first things I did when I got here to revamp that, and why we're in the process of training our folks in that new use of force policy.
Again, I think that concludes all the questions that we have. And I guess want to thank each and every one of you for coming out. I intentionally I've tried to be very quiet and let you guys have an opportunity to ask questions, because I can ask Chief Sullivan questions, but I thought it was important for the community to have an opportunity to ask questions. We see information, but sometimes it's like, well, does that mean this? And hopefully this was a beginning of those conversations. It probably won't be the last time I will ask Chief Sullivan to come back out to our community to talk some more as things develop on this. And as you saw on the presentation, we likely will be back once the DOJ has issued whatever it is they have issued. We will be back to get the community concerned. And I just continue to encourage you to stay informed and stay engaged. There's a website that specifically has the information regarding the DOJ investigation. It has copies of all of the correspondence that the city receives or the city to keep locked in. So thank you for taking the time to come out on a Thursday night to talk to us. And I want to say especially again, thank you, Chief Sullivan, for making yourself available for tonight's time.